Hello, everybody, and welcome back to another episode of the Ramos Law Difference Makers podcast. It's my job as your host to give you someone to make you think. Today, I'm going to do that in spades. So, as your host, I, Dr. Jim Hoven, have this opportunity to do this every week. I'm talking to cool people doing cool things. Today, you know what? You might have some questions for my guest that we'll answer later, because you can send those in by email, etc. Or you may have some thoughts that you go, I don't understand. Or you may go, man, this guy is legit and I totally want to learn more. The reason I prepped this podcast with this is because today I have as my guest an attorney who does criminal defense. And for so many people, that brings a weird bells in their minds, right? Like they go, criminal defense, who's defending criminals? Well, you know what? Everyone in our country deserves a voice, and they deserve a chance at having their story heard, and that's what my guest today does. So I'm super happy to get this started. My guest today is Mr. Mark Savoy, and he's with the Colorado Legal Defense Group, and it is with great pleasure and honor that I welcome you, Mark. Thank you so much for coming to the show.
Thanks for inviting me.
Absolutely. So first of all, before we get started into what criminal defense law is and all that kind of thing, I know that you've wanted to be attorney for a long time. That was what you wanted to be, I think, in college, if I was kind of getting the information right. Where did that desire come from, and what was the impetus that made you say, you know what, I'd really like to do this for a living as an attorney, and part B, I want to be a criminal defense attorney?
That's a great question. I think realistically, I had an eye on politics at first. Come from a little bit of a political family, right?
Okay.
And then over time, something happened where I kind of fell into criminal defense as an interest. And so it went something like this. My grandpa was mayor of Kansas City, right? That was cool. And he was an inspiring figure in my life. And so growing up, I was like, oh, I really like this politics. And I knew that was weird from the get. And I'm not
Did you live in realm with him? Like, were you with
him a little bit, yeah. So he ran for state senator at that time. It wasn't in his peak. He's older now. He's like 96, actually.
Oh, wow.
Yeah.
You have longevity genes in your family, my friend.
Yeah, we certainly hope that I get that too. But so he was doing that, and I knew I liked that. And not just like the left or right thing, but almost like if politics were a sport. I'm fascinated by people articulating a vision, it having a counter vision, push against it, right? And how people reconcile that who are in the middle, like the voter, right? That's amazing to me. That whole process, the sport almost. And I hate using that word because it's not a sport to the people who live it. But I am kind of fascinated by the horse race.
That's amazing. You know, and to deviate on that point for a minute, I've never heard or thought of it that way, but that makes it make so much more sense for me as like one person has a vision and another is pushing against that vision. I've never heard it that way. And the sport thing, the dynamic, I think if we did, honestly, I think if we looked at it as sport, we would take it a lot less personal. Yeah. Because at the end of the day, now especially, and you know, I mean, you're probably closer to it than I am, but if you're a Democrat, Republicans are all idiots. If you're a Republican, Democrats are all dunces, and never the two will mix. And I think that's a shame if we did look at it as, hey man, we're playing tennis. And
sure.
Sometimes I'm going to get one over on you. Sometimes you're going to get one over on me. But the deal is to make the game beautiful. How can we find out what's best for our constituents, our country, our world,
right,
and move forward? I love the way you frame that.
Yeah, well, and you know, sometimes there are cheaters in the game or people who play dirty, and other times there are people who play, you know, with clarity, and they're actually good people. But to get to your original question, so I had that interest, right? Mm-hmm. I go study political science at K-State. And by about my sophomore year, it's occurring to me that I'm going to need a job. And so that's where the law thing comes in. I do the exact thing that when I was going into like my intro to whatever law classes, those prep courses before you actually get into them, they're like, well, you know, most of you had good reasons for being here. I will tell you that what we find is if people are just doing it to get a job, that's not the best. More on that later. But while I was at K-State, I took this class, Intro to Sociology, and this professor very kindly wrote, "You were born to be a social researcher." So I took this interest in sociology, which is like broader than political science, just seeing how groups of people are impacted by social problems broadly, if I had to like really just put it out simply. And so I then studied criminology in there. And so, okay, I started to study crime, and I thought that was amazing. I liked politics, and I started to think, okay, what's like the intersection of this space? Maybe I could marry the two interests in a way. And I haven't done it quite perfectly just yet, but after I went to Kansas State, I then went to KU Law. There, I did the thing where at that point in my life, honestly, I didn't even know what I wanted to do. My 1L year, I got my butt kicked, if I'm being honest. Had a breakup a little before then. I was not right. And you know what ended up happening is I had an internship. There's a law firm in Orlando, Florida. It's called the Umansky Law Group or something like that. Umansky Law Firm, I think. I'm used to using Colorado Legal Defense Group. But Bill Umansky, he gave me a chance to just be an unpaid intern, right? And that probably kept me from dropping out.
Really?
Yeah, because for me, when I was going to KU Law, I mean, I literally had a professor one time tell me, Mark, you don't really speak like a lawyer.
What does that mean? What did he mean by that?
She.
And, she, sorry.
That probably has to do with sort of the indifference and the casual nature in which I speak. Right now, I'm kind of riding the line of informal and formal, but like, you know, in high school debate, once upon a time, they'd call it judge adaptation, right? Well, at that moment in my life, I was just about being casual, my authentic self, not really engaged, I think, in a way that conveys intelligence, passion, the way lawyers are supposed to. And I was really annoyed of seeing and learning about like appellate law issues, things that I knew it wasn't for me. I was never going to be drafting these huge briefs that, I don't know, it just wasn't my thing, what they were trying to teach us, right? And so when I then got into something that wasn't just about case holdings.
And that was in your internship?
Yes, with the Umansky Law Firm down in Orlando. It opened up my eyes. First of all, some of those people were weird, a little goofy, like me. I'm a punk rock kid. I played some music growing up. And so all of a sudden, I felt like sort of a counterculture within criminal law that is different than other lawyers. And that's not to speak ill of anyone in civil law, right? Obviously, Ramos Law is awesome. Thanks for having me here. But it was more like, oh, there's a more casual type of person who might, you know, speak more rather than write stuff and actually get into a courtroom and use that set of skills. It just opened my eyes. Like I saw trial, a voir dire. That was very interesting.
And explain to the audience what that means, voir dire.
Yeah, jury selection, right? So when you get called in, you have a summons and you're asked to do jury duty, right? The lawyers start talking to you if you're lucky, if you get into the room at that point. And I do mean that, like if you're lucky, because I think it's exciting to do that, or I wouldn't be in the space I'm in. And so, I remember day one, there was like a sex offender that we were representing, right? And actually he didn't offend, as it turns out. The state had been running like a sting operation in an adult chat room, right? And so a guy didn't know it, but someone in a chat room asked for a breakaway session. And when they broke away, our client had their penis out, right? Not a good look to a cop.
No.
Okay. Later they would say, oh, I'm 13, by the way. And it was already too late, and they tried to bring that. But essentially, a jury said not guilty. Like, that's not how that works. You have to say you're a minor first. The state of Florida needs to do that. And so they returned not guilty. Not that I think anyone said that man gets credit for being the moral arbiter or man of the year. But, that was really exciting. And so all of a sudden, I get into my 2L year, my 3L year, and I'm like, okay, well, I know I can do something here, right? Like I can have an impact on people. That appealed to me from like the olden days of maybe what politics should be type thinking, right? And maybe there could be a bridge or something where if I ever wanted to do politics, I could like use the law as a bridge for me personally, but while serving people. And so I did something a little odd on my way out of law school. I went to the Kansas legislature and I was a nonpartisan fiscal analyst, right?
And what does that mean?
It means I did budget work, right? And it sounds super dry to most people, but again, I had this interest in like government already, and then I had an interest in like the government space and crime more specifically. And I got on some criminal budgets. And I'd say as far as like a peak experience, I got to staff the House Appropriations Committee, which was amazing. I did get to see DOC budgets, learn about programming and how resources were used. And then at a certain point, some people in my life, family, friends, were saying like, but you're not really practicing, right? And this started to get to me, like, you're not really practicing. And so I took a job at a DA's office in Colorado, the 4th Judicial District Attorney's office. And that was a very harsh transition for me, if I'm being blunt. And I think part of it was going from being neutral. Like in that job I just described about budgets, I could serve a Democrat, I could serve a Republican. And it's a fascinating experience to see how people are in public when they're facing a microphone, and in private when they're in, you know, the closed door session. I got to be in those rooms a lot of the time, right? But going from having no opinion, that was my job, do not have an opinion, to suddenly you're going to advocate and you need to potentially incarcerate individuals and you need to be passionate about it. By the way, do you remember those rules of evidence? I didn't, just to be blunt, right? I had to come up quick. And I did that for about a year and a half.
Were you on one side or another too, where you were either prosecuting or defending?
No, just prosecution.
Just prosecution?
Right.
Okay.
And so that, it probably wasn't a good fit for me, right? So I leave, and no ill will towards that office. They have an elected down there, Mike Allen, who went to KU Law, so he was always nice to me. I like that guy. He's perfectly fine. But I leave that office, and this is going to get back to this weird view of myself as a little bit punk rock, right? I had 2 job interviews. I wasn't sure whether I wanted to go to defense or just go to a different office without getting into reasons, but I applied to like 5 jobs, got 2 interviews, and I knew that I nailed both interviews. I knew it. Like, and this is kind of like,
you could feel it. Yep.
And I was like, all right, time to celebrate. I'm going to go buy myself a bass guitar. And the Colorado Legal Defense Group, Michael Becker, one of the owners, called me back. And I was like, yeah, I'll come up right away. Can't wait. And that is kind of how I found myself in criminal defense. And this was probably the final shift. And I love this part. And it kind of got lost for a while there. But like serving people in criminal defense is amazing. Okay.
Explain that, because people might go, well, wait a minute, you're defending criminals, you're defending someone who is probably guilty, right? That's going to be the mindset. They're probably guilty. There's a reason that they're there. It's not that they were necessarily wrong place or wrong time, or maybe that happens a lot. I don't know. You can share that with us, but how did you come to that side being, I can serve people, the higher good, or are you serving that individual to get less of a sentence or to get them off from a crime they committed? Give me that thought.
Right. Well, I think I know a verse, Matthew 7:7, thou shalt not be judged, lest ye be judged. And I think criminal defense attorneys, whether they're Christian, agnostic, atheist, it doesn't really matter. I think we all more or less will have that value. That's a pretty consistent thing, that there's some humility to know that, hey, I've made mistakes in my life. Who hasn't? And I think it's not to say that I would do some of the things that those I serve have done, but you're going to have a bad moment in life. And sometimes there should be a criminal consequence, right? And I think a lot of people get it confused. They think that just because you're a defense attorney, you think there should be no consequences for people. That's not true at all, right? That's just not true.
For sure.
But what you realize is, okay, cops, they're often engaging with our clients at 2 or 3 in the morning, right? Some of them are college educated, some aren't. Some know the law really well and they stay on top of it. Some don't. Some have their own vices and issues that they're working through. They make these best assumptions they can on very rushed time schedules. As a DA, for example, I remember going on a dispatch ride along. I did a ride along where I saw the dispatch screen flashing, and we'd go to houses, right? And you'd show up, and people who called in were saying things like, On the phone, you could hear it literally through the car. Oh my God, he's about to kill me. And then you'd show up at the door and they'd say, get the hell away. What the F are you doing here? This and that. And so what's that cop supposed to do? Are they supposed to make an arrest based on the earlier phone call, or are they going to leave? I'll tell you in that particular situation that I'm referring to, we just left. But my point is 2 or 3 in the morning, people are intoxicated sometimes. Sometimes there's an actual urgency, like, they're responding to violence. People are making snap judgments. So step 1, the government comes into contact with people who presumably need help, or they're breaking the law in a different way, like, let's say, drug use. That's kind of a whole different thing. I'll come back to that one, though. And so, okay, step 1 is like, there's some contact with police. Well, did they provide this person with, knowledge of their situation? Were they advised of their rights if they start asking questions while they're under arrest, for example? Did they lie to them? A lot of people think cops just have to tell the truth. That really blows some of our clients' minds. So at the Colorado Legal Defense Group, since we're a private firm, we come into people who often have resources. Sometimes they don't, but some people are well off. They haven't had this experience where, like, they've been mistreated, and all of a sudden they're shocked that the cops might put on the cuffs a little too tight, or that they get shoved into a car, that they're not given a chance to just put their clothes on, right? Even though they're in their almost $1 million Colorado home. So they're confused, and it's panic, and it's crazy. And maybe they make statements. Maybe they're under the influence, right? Maybe they make mistakes along the way, and they say some things that are true or maybe aren't. Okay, then it gets to a DA's office. And the DA's, it kind of depends on what the case is and what jurisdiction you're talking about, but every DA is different. Every office is different. Elected officials matter, without a doubt. But sometimes you end up hitting a jurisdiction where, and I'm not gonna name names, but let me put it to you this way. If you end up in a certain jurisdiction where maybe the elected wants to run for Congress, do you think he's gonna be soft or harsh on someone?
Hard on crime.
Yeah. Someone wants to suddenly just throw the book at someone. Well, what if the evidence is not there? What if it all relies on one person's statement? Right? One person's statement. Just one person said something. There's no physical evidence to corroborate it. But, like, long story short, it's amazing because people suddenly need you in a way that is scary. There's a lot of pressure, especially if you think the person's innocent, which happens more than you think.
How much does that happen? I'm interested in that because I just saw something on TV in the last 2 days where a gentleman, and I'm going to call him a gentleman because they just found out that he didn't do it after being in prison for 20 years.
Right.
And they let the guy out, and he still has a smile on his face. And I'm like, I'm impressed by how he seems to be put together, given 2 decades of his life are gone. Does it happen a lot where people are falsely imprisoned?
I would say 20 or 30% of the time, maybe not false imprisonment, right? But I would say that there's an out and out lie.
Because someone's got to take the fall? Is that the deal?
Well, or someone's making something up. I'll give you a common example. Divorce, okay? Mom and dad get in a fight, okay? We'll make the dad the bad guy here just because, whatever. Yeah. Dad says mom hit him in the face a couple times. Well, Colorado has a law that says you have to be arrested if you're charged with domestic violence. So he calls in, okay, there's a slap face. They have 2 kids, right? Okay, and suddenly dad has a little bit of a head start in a family law way. How come? Well, she's going to go to jail for a second. They're going to ask that person, since they're the victim, what's your position on bond? Oh, I want to set that high. I felt really unsafe. I don't think my kids are safe. Okay, then he goes, hires a divorce lawyer. Mom's still in there. Maybe she comes to the Colorado Legal Defense Group. Her mom might be calling us. Hey, can you go on a jail visit? We go meet her. She goes, I'm 5'3". That guy's 6'4". He's got a 100-pound size advantage on me. I don't know why they believed him. Like, what? And that's how a case starts.
Because the law says if someone reports it, then they got to do it.
Right.
Wow.
There's a mandatory arrest on DVs. So that's a situation, though, where, like, And I'm not saying that the lie is the only example, but it's an easy one to understand where people have a motive to actually go after someone. And a lot of people struggle with this. Oh, suddenly you're victim blaming, right? Okay. I'm actually all about people being heard, okay? But one thing I think people forget is if we just always say, in all circumstances, trust the victim, that's great till it's you who's on the other side and someone's accusing you.
Yeah.
Do you have due process? Do you have an opportunity to be heard? Does there need to be a certain amount of evidence? What if it's completely fabricated? Another example is just overcharging, by the way. Like in that 20 to 30%, cops will get some of it right. The DAs will have some of it right. But maybe there was a fight in the home, right? But maybe the part about someone grabbing a cane and hitting him on the head wasn't true. Maybe my client admits privately, I was a few too many drinks in and I did hit her. I shouldn't have done that. That was wrong. But I swear I never grabbed that cane. And that's why you don't see a mark. And all of a sudden, your job as the defense attorney with a client like that is, okay, let's mitigate this to a space where there's a proportionate response to what actually happened and what the DAs can prove.
Wow, that's really interesting. I could see that being a huge issue in sex crimes. So if someone has an axe to grind against someone and they wanted to get them in trouble, let's say there was a breakup of a relationship and someone's all upset and a new person starts a new relationship, then they start talking about, oh, he hurt me sexually or something happened. Is that a big thing that you see in those kind of cases where people are literally saying things to hurt another person that may or may not be true?
Yeah, sure. And those are complex cases. And I'm going to give a little shout out. This might sound weird to DAs in that space. Those cases are tough from their point of view, okay? Now, they're tough on the defense side because of leverage. Come back to that one. But, okay, for the DAs, okay, a lot of times there will be no signs of like a rape. What do I mean? They'll do a SANE examination and they'll go to a hospital and there might be some tearing, okay, on someone's body. But is that indicative of a sex assault, of a rape? Not necessarily. And so this is a weird space for everyone, right? The DA's office might have someone crying, saying, he did, she did. Don't presume these days. That's another thing. It happens all over the place, different people, right? Somebody harmed me in some way. Okay, they know they have kind of a weak case. Their expert's going to come up who did the SANE exam and say, it cannot definitively be used to say that this was non-consensual, because some people like rough sex. It's a fact. So all of a sudden they might proceed on it feeling a moral obligation to a victim. And this is one of the tense spaces. On defense, we might have someone who they're saying they're lying to get the kids. That case comes up, you bet. Or even that religious difference was just too much, or something went sideways. Maybe there's a pot of money somehow. Someone's connected to an estate. Yeah, that's a complicated one.
Wow.
Yeah, but like there are people who know how to game the system. And so, we might have a client who, okay, we believe that it's all about mom's money. That's the real motive. If this person gets cut out, there are some grandkids who, they're sharing children. So the victim in a case is sharing children with an individual. Maybe that person, once they get our client to go away, suddenly can get resources from a wealthy parent who will provide for the grandkids. Therefore, their life is kind of subsidized. They get resources and they got rid of that problem that would have made family dinners very uncomfortable for another 18 years. And people are like, that's dark. How can you say that? It's like, yeah, rape's dark. Murder's dark. Drug distribution is dark, of course. And if these things can happen, and they do, I'm not suggesting they don't, then people can fabricate too. And police can be well-intentioned. They show up at a house. They see a gun laying around, and there's blood on someone's forehead. And so when a victim says, hey, they used a gun, They believe him, even though maybe the gun wasn't used.
And so that's all evidence-based that comes down the road. And in the meantime, charges have been levied because you got to make those decisions very quickly, like you said.
Yep.
Wow, that's crazy. I want to kind of come back to something that you had talked about that made me think about something. If someone comes into a crime, they get charged, and they did it. Let's just pursue whatever the crime is, they did it. And all of a sudden, there was administrative error that was done. And like you'd mentioned earlier, it's made me kind of think about it. If they didn't write down something, if there was a detail left out,
Sure.
that now makes the case kind of go away or get very much relieved.
Yep.
That's good in the sense that these people didn't do what they're supposed to. But if the crime really happened and they get off by technicality, is that a good thing?
Yes. Now, hear me for a second.
Mm-hmm.
It's complicated is probably the longer, better answer.
Okay.
But the short answer is yes. Maybe not for that individual who's a victim in a case. And not all crimes, by the way, have a victim. Victimless crimes, drug use. I mentioned that earlier.
Yes.
So like, let's say a cop, you might call this a technicality, didn't really have the goods to search a car. There was no reasonable suspicion to stop it or probable cause to open up a trunk, okay? But the cop has a hunch that someone's driving and they just open up the trunk. Okay, 150 pounds of meth. Holy shit, 150 pounds of meth. That cop's intuition was spot on.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, except they violated the Constitution. And if suddenly law enforcement can go around opening trunks, okay, that's a problem.
Mm-hmm.
People have a natural reaction. But I'm not committing a crime. Sure, maybe not. Maybe no one's going to open up your trunk. You're not going to find, I'm borrowing from It's Always Sunny in Philadelphia. I want the world to know. Yeah. Dennis, a character in that show, has like duct tape, zip ties, and chloroform in the back of his car, right? Like, sure, I'm not going to have that in my car personally. I'm not worried about that. But you know what I am worried about is a society in which people can be stopped for no reason. They can just have the government get into their things. The government can learn religion. And when I say the government, I'm talking about people. All government is people, right? Can we do that? No, we shouldn't be able to, not with the United States Constitution, Fourth Amendment, which is supposed to protect us from unlawful search and seizures, right? So, look, it can be bad if there's a victim for a person. But in the long run, okay, if it's done right, a DA's office, a police force, learns from a situation to make sure that it's not in vain and they never do it again. And suddenly in the future, with 99 similarly situated defendants and alleged victims, they get it right.
And so what would that look like in your right? Because where I would put myself in that place is, okay, true, they have the meth in the trunk. Then that meth is going to go hurt somebody, presumably. So what is the right move? Their intuition was right. Is it then to follow them, like let them go, not look at it, and then follow them is the right course of action to say, okay, we're going to wait till they open the trunk? Like what's the right action?
Well, I do think police officers often have like a lawyer on staff, and I think that's a fascinating job. If I were in the business of advising police, I would say case law is extremely favorable to the state. And you just have to wait for someone to cross over a line, pull them over.
Got it.
After that, after the stop part, it's a little more complicated, okay? Especially nowadays with body-worn camera, okay? A jury should theoretically, especially in Colorado where legislation was passed after Breonna Taylor, George Floyd, that requires all departments to essentially have that, okay? The jury should be seeing signs of impairment. So if the police officer saw drugs in the car in plain view, that's one thing. If they see impairment that's on the person, that's another. Slurred speech, eyes, that's something. But when it comes to like a space like a glove box or trunk, that becomes a little more complicated, but suffice it to say, again, it can't be done willy-nilly. One of the scariest parts of the law is that for the senses that can't be experienced by a juror, theoretically, a police officer has the ability to say, so-and-so smelled of this. Based on my training and experience, I smelled what smelled to be crack cocaine. I don't know. And you say like, wait, do you think that really happens? Well, not frequently. Not frequently. Like, we're not over here being paranoid, at least where I work.
Yeah.
I love my public defenders in this state, but those guys, sometimes get very paranoid after a couple years in that office. I've noticed that. And I say that with all the love to them. And they might be right because, Kurt Vonnegut, right? Just because you're paranoid don't mean they're not having you.
Sure.
Right? Like, who knows? But like, my general assumption is that the officers who do make a false statement, which is infuriating, and I won't get too into this, I have a trial coming up. We think in that very case, without getting into it, sure, some cops are likely to be exaggerating about particular things or even fabricating outright. It's not going to happen in a day where suddenly a defense attorney files something after a not guilty and is like, go fire him. It's not how that works. But if a case gets dismissed because of that technicality, someone violated law, and the officer keeps doing it, yeah, departments are smart. They'll make the decision eventually to let somebody go. Mm-hmm. And it takes a record of it. That's the thing, is like over time, if people are manufacturing statements or doing something shady, it'll come back.
Right.
It will.
And on that note, let's go back to the trunk one more time. So we've used that in a couple examples. What if someone calls in and there's a missing persons report and they don't know why and they don't know what, but for whatever reason, the arresting officer, or they pull over a car that they think is that, I don't know what the determinations would be when they can and can't search the car. Let's say there's a dead body or a kidnapped body that's still alive in the trunk. Does everything we've talked about so far then have any change by law because there's a human life versus a drug versus a gun versus money?
The short answer is no. Mm-hmm. The legal standards are going to be the same. But, okay. Look, there's something called exigent circumstances, right? There's a few other ones. But basically, I would say to you that the law will afford the cop cover if they say, I heard someone shouting through the trunk, muffled through duct tape. They're going to be able to pop that trunk open, right?
Got it.
They're not. That's not going to work. That defendant, that person driving the vehicle, even if they protest at that point, they're going to have the ability to search that car. Mm-hmm. If they didn't, it would be because, again, there's a hunch rather than something present. And so I guess theoretically, here's what everyone needs to know who's watching this. If you are, in fact, duct tape with zip ties in the back of a car, in a trunk, and you hear a car stop and you put together that, yes, in fact, it's the police, that's your moment to be as loud as humanly possible. You go for it. You go and you go hard. Don't stop till it's done. They got to open that trunk.
Yeah. And what if it's a dead body, though? Then what?
I suppose the smell is theoretically something, but again, they can't just open the trunk. They can't just open it. Yep. They just, that's just a fact.
Yeah. And so what about this then? For you, now we'll kind of take it more personal. Let's say you're defending someone who's been accused of a heinous crime. Fill in the blank here, because there's plenty of them that we can choose from. And so this person is, they've had a record of it, and they're on the streets, and they are accused of it. Your job, as I would understand, would be to try to help them have their side told with the best outcome possible. Ideally, no jail time. So let's say that they did it, and now there's one of these technicalities or something happens where they get off free, and then they do it again. For you guys in your line of work, is that hard for you when someone who has that predisposition, who you help get off, and then they go through and they do the same thing or something similar? I'm wired to be like, man, I screwed up. I should have let them pay the price because, look, they're doing that because I got them off. Is there any of that happens?
Not really. That's the thing. if it happened, I might have to wrestle with it. But let's think about what you just said. Someone has a rap sheet. They've got 17 or 18 felonies. I just had someone convicted of 17 or 18 felonies. I had someone like that.
That's a tough life.
They ended up doing a year. DOC, and it ran concurrent with a state that I can't name. Gotta do something.
Keep it low.
So the court was like, when I asked for that, right? There was kind of a question: why the hell shouldn't I max this out? And I had to do my thing, and I had to make my argument, and I ended up saying basically that a different jurisdiction was the appropriate place for this matter to be handled. Plus, added bonus, if we're really concerned about this particular crime, which may or may not have had a victim, okay, it did, getting made whole on a monetary front, then the easiest way to do that is not from prison, right? Even with the rap sheet, the court agreed with me and didn't max it out. But notice in this situation, that client got a consequence. At number 17 or 18, you're not making good choices. At 3 or 4, 2, hell, I would argue 2, you're not making good choices. So like the odds that you have this rap sheet, which will then give the state leverage to charge you more, the sentencing ranges will charge, right?
Yeah.
All of a sudden, a life sentence is going to manifest if you're committing a felony and it's your third. We call it big bitching, right?
Yeah.
You're a habitual offender, right? If that's the case, you're probably going to plead to something. And even the well-trained defense attorney, unless there is an obvious law enforcement fuck up, let's call it what it is.
Yeah.
Yeah, you're probably doing time. It's interesting, but no, I've never had the situation yet where it's like, okay, someone was acquitted on a sex offense or a case was dismissed on an attempt to murder or whatever, and they went back and they recidivated.
Oh, really?
It has not happened.
Wow.
Now, on drug use, nonviolent crimes.
Yep.
Yeah, that happens. And earlier, I never really got to the part of like helping people and why that's satisfying. When people are like about to lose their family, their lives, and you use a mixture of the law and some of that talky that I was talking about earlier, a different type of law. Yeah, I'm talking about something totally different than writing motions. You just talk to another human who happens to be a DA, and based on your read of them and what you think they'll appreciate, they afford them a second chance. Oh man, that's amazing. But one of the hardest clients to represent is an addict. 100%, because that kind of becomes the ride you can't get off of sometimes, and it's heartbreaking. So, okay, you tell someone, look, congratulations, you were facing a felony. I got you down to a misdemeanor, which in Colorado means eventually that'll be off your record. You've got them a second chance. They have probation, all they have to do, except it's not all they have to do. They have to stay sober, and whether you believe it's choice or like you're born with it, environment, they're stuck. Sometimes they do well. They're sober for a bit. You see their life start to make tremendous progress. You're like, holy shit, this person just went from like homeless to like, how much are you making? Maybe I should go into cooking like this guy does and do this thing because they're killing it.
Yeah.
Or I'll come back to something kind of cool in a sec, but that is really the toughest space, is when you do the job right, someone comes back to you a few months later. And one thing I really like about our firm, and this is going to sound weird, but when we're talking to clients, we make clear, like, hey, you can take or leave our advice. But one of the things we do, especially behind the scenes, out, not in public in the courtroom, but in private. Hey, maybe you did make some choices based off of our review of discovery that were exceedingly poor. Maybe you should fix this. You have to pay us $5,000, $3,000, $20,000, $25,000, $50,000. Maybe you should think to never see us again. Maybe that's the happiest thing if we can arrive in that space where you learn from this, you grow from it, and you never come back. And one of the wild things I will say about like the F word, okay? A felony can destroy lives. Like literally someone is charged with a felony, convicted of it. Well, just charged, it's enough. A charge can really do some damage, but a conviction assuredly will. One thing that's really cool, amazing, like almost makes you believe in the bootstrap mentality that has been espoused in the United States, that if anyone works hard, no matter where they're from, they can get out of it. I do see clients who suddenly can't get normal employment. So they'll like go into a trade or something. And then all of a sudden they're like doing HVAC and they have 4 or 5 employees. And they're like coming to us requesting a pardon because after 15 years, they're like killing it. And they went from having this restraint and being pushed against the wall. And what it forces them to do is be entrepreneurial and awesome and kill it. And they do. And when that happens, that's what I'm talking about. To have that moment where you see someone maybe at their worst moment and then you buy them a second chance and they kill it. It's like, oh man,
is that your high in this game, in this sport? Is that the moment where you just get so much endorphins running through your system? That's the peak. That's
the healthy one. Yeah. I'm not a robot. I have moments where it's about dunking on the opposing counsel. Mm-hmm. Sometimes if a judge is wrong and something comes back and you told them, you don't say it on record. You don't say, I told you so. But yeah, it feels good when you're back on a mistake and you're like, yep, I was right. But the real high is what we just talked about, helping the clients. And, you know, it's weird because like, I think one thing that we don't talk about, like this is so off. Your podcast is going to either love or hate this. Here we go. One thing we don't talk about is just like vulnerability and emotions. Okay. And so a lot of people who come to us, it's pretty easy. It's not that you're a psychologist, but you start recognizing patterns. Oh, this person has a codependency issue. This person has parents who are helicopter parents in their adulthood. Addict. This person has been abused extremely poorly, like at length, right? Yes. You start to read people, and one thing I think some people need, and it sounds so weird, it's almost like they're trying to find a mistake to end up talking about something, and all of a sudden you say, hey, go get a counselor while you do this. It'll look good to the DAs. I don't know why, they just seem to care about it. Whatever the client needs to hear, you pitch them that way. You have to. You have to meet them where they are. Yep. So maybe they're proud. Maybe they're big, tough hockey players, right? They don't want to admit that sometimes they cry. Okay? You send them to a counselor and you say, hey, I think you should find like a healthy hobby. Like, I know I'm telling you to be sober or whatever, but why don't you like airplanes? Okay, go find some club where like you can fly remote control airplanes or something. People who have a similar interest, whatever it is. And airplanes are really weird. No one has that interest, but it's like once they just get a few resources that no one really pushed them to get, they're good. That was really the whole issue. Like even in like, to a certain extent, domestic violence is really weird because I think what I see a lot of the time, people assume that there's always like victim or defendant.
Perpetrator. Yeah.
There's so much mutual combat and shared pain and a long backstory. And I'm even talking about on like broken phones, right? Where someone calls the police and they threw a phone and they get hit with something called criminal mischief or destroying property. It's just like, oh, yeah, you guys probably should have gone to counseling or called it like 2 years ago. It's really sad. That's really hard. And once you get a person to have those moments where they reflect in an honest and a vulnerable way, they're good. A lot of people and so amazingly, a lot of what I think a successful defense attorney is doing, if they're doing it right, if they're not just about the paycheck. Yeah. Because again, if you're just about the paycheck, you're not giving a shit about telling them to do things they don't want to hear.
Yes.
Okay.
Yes.
Like, so you tell them like, go do counseling, go get engaged, stay sober, take some classes. And I might be framing it to them, depending on who they are. Look, DAs are kind of ticky-tacky. I don't even know why, but they have you take these bullshit classes, man. Get 2 of these under your belt. I'm going to send you to this counselor. It's just a thing that we got to do. I'm acting like I think it's the dumbest shit in the world.
Right.
I might think they need it.
Exactly.
I might not. I'm not even, honestly, I don't think it's my place to tell them whether morally it's right or not, but it's like, if you push them towards something that's going to work for them and it actually helps them legally, and even better, it really does, in fact, actually help them. Holy shit, now you're talking.
Now you're talking. Man.
Yeah.
What do you think is the benefit to the system? We'll just call it the part of the criminal justice system that's involved with incarcerating people. What do you think the benefit is to try to get people lesser sentences? Because there's prison overcrowding. It costs taxpayer dollar on one side. On the other side, we don't want predators running loose in our streets, right? So from your perspective as someone whose job it is, essentially you're trying to keep the system less overburdened with souls inside of it, and hopefully choose the right ones that are not out, being predators on me and you on the outside. Give me your thoughts on the system and what you can do to help with the cost.
Easy one there. Easy topic.
Sorry.
I'm like, okay, I think when I think of the system right now, I think that people want a silver bullet.
Being the people on the outside.
Well,
the
like
citizens.
They look at it and they're like, I think if we get rid of bond, suddenly everything will be okay. I think if we incarcerate more people and we're tough, it'll be an effective deterrent to lessen crime. One sentence is going to cure it. Respectful disagree to those individuals, no matter the issue. Your one issue is not enough. I would say that where the system is right tends to be the following. The state has to prove something beyond a reasonable doubt. That's good. That is healthy. And you'd be surprised. Prosecutors, you don't hear them bitch about that a lot either.
Yeah.
Right? They believe in that. They know that they have a job to do, that individual rights matter, and that it should take something for the state to deprive someone of liberty. It needs to be more than just, Jim, do you remember when we were out in the hall and you made an appropriate grab ass at me? No, you chuckle. But if it's just a statement, why not? Why not? It has to be more than that, right?
Yes,
It has to be more than that. And I understand that gives cover to a lot of assholes who might be grab-assing, right? Mm-hmm. That's weird, for sure. Mm-hmm. But it has to be proven. That I think the system has right. I think as far as places it can improve, okay. This is going to sound crazy, but I think the quality of the law and criminal law needs to be more personal. I don't know if the citizenry is willing to pay for it. That's the real talk.
What would that look like? So it's going to cost more, but what are we paying for?
To me, oh man, I'm going to lose 100% of all practicing criminal lawyers as I say this. But to me, you know what that really looks like? It makes sure that a DA's office is fully staffed or even more staffed so that you don't have what I experienced when I was in the Fourth. And it's not the Fourth's fault per se, but down there, their dockets are overwhelmed. They have so many open cases. I would laugh and chuckle as a misdemeanor DA when people suggested that I was doing something to pick on their client for whatever reason, when often it was like, oh, this is a female defendant. I thought this was a guy before I read it, because I'm reading the police report so fast, trying to formulate an offer, that I just get in and out with the relevant facts. I put it aside, and until it's going to trial, like, I don't have enough time with 700 open cases to really review that with the diligence it should. Public defender system, totally overwhelmed. totally overwhelmed, and people do deserve quality representation. I get pissed when I hear my clients and people say they're public pretenders. Bullshit. Public defenders do an invaluable service. Everyone deserves representation. But you know what? Their clients are left to wonder, why is this person not returning my call? Well, I know the answer.
Yeah, too busy.
That person has 250 cases. If someone has 150 open felony cases, which that actually might be the number for like Denver, like I bet those attorneys have about 150 felony cases apiece. Okay. That's insane. That's insane. That's like not sleeping. Oh, and by the way, where if they went into like PI, they come to Ramos Law, you give them, they had a chance to work here and they put in 120 hours of work. If they can read and they're competent and they care, you will reward them for the hard work. I'm talking compensation. I don't know what your numbers are, but they'd get paid. They'd be respected. They're disrespected over there. They get paid, 80 maybe, which is, it sounds good, except if you're experiencing 150 felony cases, you're like, yeah, that sucks.
Yeah, it's taking your soul.
Yeah, right. And you know why they're doing it? Because they believe that those individuals deserve representation. So to me, the system needs like a quality upgrade.
Gotcha.
And then, look, there are political hot topics. You could talk about bond. You could talk about like police reform. All these things are good and fine. As a general rule, if you want my personal opinion, I think that broadly speaking, crimes of violence, it's okay to be tough on crimes of violence or sex crimes, especially if there's an allegation of rape. I do think there's a distinction between like what I'll describe as a grab ass moment and a violent rape. There is. And we should distinguish between the perpetrators and the victims who go through those. Okay? They're not the same. Neither is okay. Don't confuse what I'm saying, right? But to me, violent crimes and a heck of a lot of sex crimes you should go hard at. Sure, why not? It's not okay. We should use the criminal system as a deterrent. But, okay, then we come to kind of this weird bridge where like the ACLU and Koch, the Koch brothers are like kind of weirdly pairing up now to change stuff on like sentencing related to drugs. And there's surprising agreement, right? Like maybe if society thinks drugs are an addiction and you're not distributing them and you're not carrying a gun on you while you do drugs, right? Maybe those guys should be treated differently. Like, do we actually mean what we say? Like if the AMA comes out and they say it's a disease, it's a horrible problem, and we need to put more dollars preventing people from doing it or having resources available so that when people want to get clean, they do. Like, to me, that's a space where like there seems to be no nuance between the left and right. We're just talking about all crimes like they're the same when they're not. To me, that theft, which are often motivated, theft crimes, often motivated by strain, economic necessity, there is a difference in that type of crime, especially if it's like a theft from a Walmart, respectfully, and a theft from a home. If you go into someone's house, that's totally different, right? That's I think society should protect people's homes and have harsher consequences than if some mom tries to put on a few extra frozen meals at a Walmart and send it through the line, tries to get out, and the little alarm goes off and she tried to skirt out with $50 in extra food costs. Oh, whoops, I forgot. It's like one of the most common cases ever, right? Someone's going through a Target, a Walmart, they only scan some of the items as they're doing it, right? They think they're brilliant. It's like, the camera's right there. Like, you're fucked.
Yeah.
Like, but good luck. I mean, right now, I do have that political interest to this day, but like the space doesn't feel healthy for an honest conversation. I do think, broadly speaking, I see some encouraging things in Colorado, but then, I mean, honestly, there are moments where like, when it comes to equal treatment under law, one of the things that does bother me, it might not be the way you thought. It might not be that I'm bothered by a client being acquitted and then doing something bad, but you know what does bother me? What bothers me is when a judge on a DUI will set a bond really high. They can't get out, okay? And then I have someone who's charged, we'll just make up a hypo with that doesn't work. 2 attempt murder counts. That'll work. Okay.
Yep.
2 different jurisdictions, let's say. Okay. And I get them out on bond for less than the DUI. What the fuck is that?
Why would that happen?
Well, because, and this is the weird spot. See, this is the spot. That might be me. That might be me. I know what I'm doing. I can see, DA's office over here doesn't quite realize what's happening with the bond in this other jurisdiction. Call the family, hey, be ready to post this person's bond. The case in another jurisdiction might be about to close out. Sorry about that. And so, yeah, something like that might happen where I successfully persuade a court to give someone their freedom. And for whatever reason, DAs don't quite do their homework. They miss a detail. And, bond's different than the ultimate outcome, whether someone goes to jail or prison, but still someone is given their temporary freedom to roam. And that's weird. And again, that comes back to let's staff everything fully. Let's actually give a shit about attention to detail. And if it means you have to have more judges, maybe you need that too. I think where that's an issue though, and why I suspect we have the system we have, is because, good things, nice things cost money. Do you want to pay a literal extra % in your taxes to effectuate what I'm talking about? What if it costs 2%? Okay, well now we're talking about children's health care, elderly care. Why not give the money to those disadvantaged groups of people? And so all of a sudden we're talking politics. And again, that's why I love the universe and this intersection of politics and criminal law. And I've always known I love this space. But yeah, I think our system, honestly, it's real close to needing a page 1 rewrite. I don't see, and I don't quite like that because again, I like the fundamentals of it. I like beyond a reasonable doubt. I think that's big. I like that we have a jury available to us, not some hoity-toity cross-section of just doctors, just lawyers, just powerful people. No, just a real cross-section of a community. I think there's value in that because different life experiences can inform whether you think someone's innocent or guilty. But there are so many problems where, when I was speaking about that bond situation, I am closer to speaking to an actual experience, and maybe my actual experience with that was worse than what I said.
Wow.
Right? So there are problems like that all over.
Do you think, and this came out of left field as you were talking to me, I remember hearing that in some countries, and this debate has been going on since I was a kid, right, in high school and talking about in or whatever debate class or whatever, there are countries where, for example, if you steal something, your hand gets cut off.
Yeah.
Right. And I don't know how much that still exists. I'm sure it's still there in some different places. And they say that those harsh penalties are a deterrent for crime because everyone knows if I get caught doing this, this has happened. There's no question. There's no something. Do you think there's any middle ground between what you're saying, a jury of your peers, of a cross-section of your peers, evidence beyond a reasonable doubt, making sure that you have adequate time to prove your case, and then, but if it comes down, before it ever happens, this is what's going to happen. Hand gets cut off, and that might be example, but if you're this, you get that. Is that a good thing, and is that part of a page 1 rewrite? I
wouldn't like that. And to me, that comes down to something about fairness. I don't quite know what I'm after here.
Yeah.
But, okay, if you have 2 kiddos in the house and you end up catching one of them stealing cookies and the kid tries to rat the other one out as the one who stole the cookies, does that mean that for the next 6 months, if they're 7 years old, they can't go play with their friends? Is that going to keep the kid from getting the cookie again? Probably not. If anything, if I'm that little kid, I'm thinking back to when I have childlike thoughts, right? I'm probably pissed. I'm going to try to take some candy next time because the punishment does need to fit the crime, right? To an extent. Now, on the other side of that, can sentencing have a deterrent effect? Yes, of course. And that's why, again, I think where I'm at is so like uncomfortably nuanced that truthfully, I struggle to answer that question with force, because for me, it's all so complicated. So let me give you an example of a deterrent not working, okay? I'm just a white guy over here. What do I know about knowing stuff? But let's imagine for a second, I'm a young black man on the south side of Chicago, okay? Let's say that my family has a need, and I know I can go make money by selling drugs. I'm not an adult. I'm 14 or 15, okay? Let's say one of my family members has a serious health concern. They can't pay bills. I might face, let's say we made it the death penalty for dealing drugs.
Mm-hmm.
Okay? Let's think on that. Is that going to deter that kid? First, the
Only
kid
to a point.
The kid has to hear it first.
Right. That's right.
Okay?
Yep.
Second, does the kid can a young adult actually process whether or not, what a life sentence is? Okay, third, if it's mom or dad who's sick, who am I to judge that kid? Again, back to like Matthew 7:7. Mm-hmm. Who am I to judge that kid? In fact, I'll tell you, I might be honored to represent that kid in a weird way if he came into my shop, right? It'd be like, oh, you were doing what? That's so dangerous for you. And you were willing to do that for your family? You're screwed. We have a lot of work to do. But man, I might appreciate that person's situation. Someone out there, if they're smart, they're thinking, but you're using juveniles. Come on, man. That's why the law protects them a little bit. Okay, fine. 25-year-old, 32-year-old with an old 83-year-old somebody. They try to commit some sort of fraud on someone, an adult theft, a white-collar crime. I don't know in some spaces if we can expect the law to be an ultimate deterrent. And I get annoyed with this kind of in a gun debate as well, as odd as this might sound, okay? Nothing is ever 100% effective, okay? So like if we think through something, right? One thing that I find funny, and this is just rhetorically, I'm not trying to get into a gun debate, but let's think through something, okay? I have heard from certain people, okay, we should never have prohibition on any type of gun ever. Every single one. RPG, rocket-propelled grenade launcher, fucking legal right now. Let's go. Okay, cool. Why is that? Because the laws aren't going to stop someone from using them. Okay, well, first of all, maybe I'm wrong on this, but I don't think there are a lot of RPGs in circulation, and part of that might be because there are state laws that make it illegal to hold those. But let's take the snark out of it, okay? Stop signs do not stop people, Ramos Law knows this, from not going through a stoplight or a stop sign or an intersection might be the right way to say it. Every time. Does that mean stop signs are stupid? Fuck them. We don't need stop signs. They're dumb. They shouldn't exist. Of course not. Same thing with stoplights, right? So like, I definitely think that harsher laws can play a part. Are they ever going to stop crime completely? No. Do they need to be proportionate always? And should there be a real harm if someone's liberty is deprived? And I think that's the way to put it. Like, at the end of the day, it's so nice to talk about big picture macroeconomic shit. No. Is there a harm to someone or society that is real and powerful? If there's a harm, maybe then we talk about someone's liberty getting taken away as a meaningful consequence.
Right.
But I think they have to be proportional. I really do. That's just like 101. And again, yeah, generally you probably do see a deterrent effect if you have a higher crime, but okay, how far do you take that? At what point does it become absurd? And at what point are you actually just paying more for it as an individual for having the rule, which I think we're very close to that in a lot of spaces where like, okay, if we have the largest incarcerated population in the country, well, why is that? Like, do we really think it's not we think we're not tough enough. Well, okay, why is our crime then going up, even though our penalties are harsher than other similarly situated countries?
Right. Looking at the stats.
Yeah.
In that case, just look at the stats.
Yeah.
Wow. What a fascinating conversation, man. I can't believe an hour has flown by for me. Like, this has been the fastest hour in my day so far. You have made me, and I hope the rest of the audience, you have made me, and I think us think. And that's what we need. You know, I love the way that your mind works. I love the fact that you're looking at things from both sides with the slant of saying everyone has rights and my job is to protect them. While you're still understanding, I want you to protect me and my family too.
Yep.
Right? And so if you saw someone that had potential to hurt me, just like if I saw someone who had potential to hurt you, I'd want us to respect each other's space, as you put our independence on that level. And man, this has just been such a good conversation for me. I want to end by asking you one question, and that is this. Given all the things you've learned, all the things you've seen, all the things you've done, is there one piece of advice that you were given or that you've picked up along the way that has helped you become fundamental to how you live your life and chasing your dreams, and even if it's in political office in your future or continuing to do the things that you do, that you would be willing to share with me and with our audience so that we might absorb that as part of our fundamental?
Could I do two?
Please.
Okay. So the first was from Zara Umansky, the wife, who was a practicing lawyer at that Umansky law firm down in Orlando. She said one time, so simply, don't reinvent the wheel. And it has only been through many evenings of bashing my head against a wall, doing research and legal work, that especially within the realm of being a practicing attorney, 100% right. It is so much better, especially if you have a meaningful caseload, to just ask someone, hey, do you have a motion that I could borrow? And then from there, don't take a shortcut. You got to make sure the motion's right, the law's right. You know, you got to put it in, but don't just try to build something from scratch. Don't. That's so dumb. Like, what's the point of having relationships with professionals if from time to time you can't help them and they can't help you? That's
so brilliant.
Yeah. Don't reinvent the wheel. Huge. Second thing, and this is probably where I kind of fell in love with the firm I'm at right now, Colorado Legal Defense Group. And I don't know that he put it in a bumper sticker, but it was very obvious. Michael Becker, one of the guys that we feature, one of the owners of the firm and also the Las Vegas Defense Group, and he has a firm out in California too. When I came to the firm, okay, I'd just come from a DA's office that was regimented. It'd be like, after so many years, you get this exposure to felonies. After this, you can then handle this type of felony. There was a very regimented system. And he was much more like, you know, there really isn't a meaningful difference between like a traffic ticket and a murder. And when you first hear it, you're like, what the fuck, Mike? Yes, there is. Yes, there is. But in a way, he's right. Okay, there are elements to prove any charge or any crime, right? And so ultimately, can the DA prove the elements? Can you defend against it? That's the starting point. That's the fundamental. And so all of a sudden, like, what I took from that really was like, kind of be fearless. And I think I have taken that too far sometimes. There have been times where, if I now reflect back on it, I have had some real pain. Like, bluntly, I've had failure, right? Like, I have ridden that philosophy hard to try to grow and put myself in uncomfortable experiences, right? And if you're representing clients and you're not up for it and you let them down, well, that's on you, and that is too far, right? If ever you're letting the client down, that's bad. But I have taken that philosophy of like, you know what? It is really fundamentally the same, no matter what. I'm going to do this. I can figure it out. I can network. I can keep pushing myself to grow if I have that fearless attitude. And I think, like, when it comes to like homicide cases, sex crimes, a lot of lawyers in Colorado, there's like I don't know, people think that they're a certain sort of elevated, that they're so prestigious isn't even the right word. Maybe it's that they're dark. Maybe it's that they're complex. It's like, no, it's just a case. Like, at the end of the day, you know, you give it the respect that's due. Someone's liberty is at interest, is probably for a longer period of time. Again, no shortcuts. But like, I really believe that if you put in the work and ultimately you end up just going in and saying, I'm going to do it right, I'm going to figure it out, it's shocking what can happen, right? That's it. That's the second piece. Just kind of go in fearless, figure it out, and fight hard. It'll work.
That is brilliant. Mark, this has been, again, so engaging. If people want to reach out to you, either A, to say, man, I want to do what you do. Like, how do I become an attorney like this? Or they need help with one of these matters, or they have questions about anything we talked about. What's the best way for them to reach you?
I'll give my email, my work email. That's fine. Mark at cldg.legal.
MARK?
Yep, and that's CLDG. That's Charlie Lima Delta Golf.legal.
Or Colorado Legal Defense
Group. That's right. That's right.
Yep.
And so that's it. Yeah, and I'd welcome that. You know, and next Thursday I have someone shadowing me from a university, so I'm very open to that sort of thing. And hopefully people don't need our services. But if they do, you know, the one thing I'd ask them to know is that we'll treat them with respect and we'll work hard for them. Those are the fundamentals.
And that's all you can ask. And you have done heavy lifting with us today, given hard work, given of yourself. And again, I appreciate it. And for those of you watching or listening, I hope this has sparked thought for you, even if it's controversial thought, something that you didn't think about before. That's good for your brain. So chew on it, ruminate on it, reflect, contemplate, whatever you do, and then share it with someone. We always want to make sure that we're making a difference through our podcast. So if you're seeing this or listening to it, please share it with someone and let them have the same kind of thought process that you've gone through today. So until next time, Mark, continued success to you and your firm. And to those of you watching, listening, remember, get out there and make a difference.